hear about these motherfuckers.
It's time to go. All I want to do is fucking eat.
We're not practicing to beat somebody. We're practicing to beat everybody.
Nowhere to run and nowhere to hide for 4 quarters. They got to see us in our house for 4 quarters. They got to look us in the eye for 4. This is about us and our family and our house. This is about us. This is our mentality. We ain't backing down. We ain't running. Set a tone, send a message. This is our house. Physical toughness wins in football now. And if you in this room, you got it. If you come in here, you better believe in it. Because this physical toughness is what makes the difference. Elite focus. That's all I do to the guy across from me. I'm fixing to whip his ass. Not in my box. Not today. It's about us. It's about our family. We attack. You take that helmet and you strike them. And you strike them and you strike them. That's how you get respect.
Now I am going to pick shit out of them. Physically, I want to break them.
Oh, friends, can you feel it? Boy, I can feel it. I am fired up. This is my week. It is Georgia-Florida week. Welcome back in to another episode of How About That DAWGSCAST. Man, I am ready to go. Every week I hear Kirby in the intro music there tell us what it's all about. This week it hits a little different. Georgia-Florida week, those hated Gators. We're going to get to that. But this last weekend was a bye week. Dogs didn't play, so I don't have anything I can point to directly to break down from this past week. I mean, there was some news around the field, but nothing on the field. And just because the Dogs didn't play doesn't mean that the college football world stopped, right? No, it was the exact opposite. There was actually a few games that mattered when it comes to the college football playoff positioning, where we are at this point in the season, and who might actually make that Final Four. Now, if you guys have been here long, you know that every Saturday, every Friday, Saturday, Sunday, at nights and on the weekends, I'm covering sports for a living. That's my day job. I focus on college football. This past weekend, though, the way it shook out when the games were played, I actually had a chance to watch football. Not for work, not in a I have to pay attention to this or that kind of way, but to just watch the games as a football fan of the number 1 Georgia Bulldogs. Now, when you sit on the top of the mountain like that, everybody knows there's a target on your back. The wind blows harder at the top. We've all heard those phrases. But it also gives you a really good view of what's happening down the mountain, if you will. The Dogs definitely have the high ground. In this past weekend, not only were there some good games, but there was also some big news that broke. That story's ongoing. We're going to get there. I told you, we talk about Georgia Bulldogs, and if there's a story that's big enough across the country, we'll talk about that too, if it relates and how it relates to Georgia football. So we're going to get there. But let's start with this bye week. We all know what's in front of us. Those hated Gators. But before we get there, let's look at what just happened. If you look around the country, you know, you have the usual suspects there at the top. And a couple of those teams actually played each other. So let's start right there. Penn State and Ohio State tangled on Saturday at the Horseshoe in Columbus. Now, coming into that game, neither of them had really been tested. They had been playing inside the conference, but let's be honest, the conference has been really a 2-team league for the last few years for certain. But no, they came in, top 10 matchup, Penn State and Ohio State. Drew Aller, the hotshot 5-star quarterback, was going to take Penn State to the promised land. James Franklin was going to prove it this year, that he could win a big game when it mattered. Ryan Day was 35-0, headed into that game against all Big Ten opponents not named Michigan. He walked out of there 36-0. James Franklin proved that he's the same James Franklin that we always thought he was. That's not a knock at him. He's just the third best coach in the Big Ten. There's no disgrace in that. Just don't, expect more than that. Now, there are more games to be played down the road. Penn State gets a shot at Michigan. I really don't expect it's going to play out any different, mostly because of what I saw on the field between those two. I saw two really talented defenses that play really good team defense that have individual players. And then I saw two offenses that looked like they had one hand tied behind their back and were wearing blindfolds. The only saving grace in that game is that we were reminded once again what a really elite player looks like when we got to see Marvin Harrison Jr. on display. He was the difference in the game. Not Kyle McCord, not Drew Aller, not the running game at Ohio State, which is virtually non-existent, not a dominant offensive line from Ohio State. No, they still have the same problems we thought they had. And a Penn State offense that had no ability to win down the field. I thought their running game would do better. But then again, when you're that bad at throwing the ball and you don't win, it's easy to stop a run game. So we learned a lot about Penn State and Ohio State. After the game, James Franklin said he thought he might have seen two of the top 5 teams, I think it was, in the country. Maybe that's what he said. I forget the exact quote, something like that. It was ridiculous. It was ridiculous. Ohio State got a good win inside the conference over a top 10 Penn State team. Kudos. But they were not in any way a team that looked dominant. Michigan looked good. Michigan's looked good all year. We might know a little bit more about why after the news broke this weekend. But taking nothing away from those players, Michigan has looked good. Granted, they haven't played a whole lot that would make you stand up and take attention. Their best win right now, let's see, is that right? Is it? I don't want to say that because I don't want to say the wrong thing right there. But we know they beat a Rutgers team. Doesn't matter. Point is, they remained undefeated. They looked good. The defense looks good. The offense, McCarthy's making plays for them. They looked good. They beat a bad team the way you're supposed to beat a bad team. Right? They beat Spartans 49-0. Kudos. But you could still watch that team and not know exactly who they are. Fair. As Georgia fans, we hear that a lot. Fair. If I'm going to listen to it, I'm certainly going to look at it that way too. Florida State beat Duke at home barely. Riley Leonard returned to the field for Duke, but Riley Leonard was not the reason that Duke almost beat Florida State. Now, it made a difference when he left the game, but Duke ran the ball against Florida State. They played good defense. So I think we still have questions about Florida State. Kudos, you're undefeated. You're probably going to win your conference. There are questions there. Later that night, I saw the I don't know what you want to call it, the being here on the East Coast, maybe you finally heard about the legend. You heard about the legend of Washington this year, and then we finally got a chance to watch them play. And then they go out and score 0 touchdowns on offense, when all we've heard about is how amazing that offense is. They were playing Arizona State, turned the ball over, 4 times, 5 times, something like that. Penix threw like 3 interceptions, maybe. Might have been 4. Had a fumble, I think. So maybe it was 3 and fumble. Whatever. They didn't score an offensive touchdown. The juggernaut that has been grabbing headlines all season couldn't get in the end zone against the Arizona State Sun Devils. And Penix fell off the Heisman radar. Well, if he didn't, he should have. So Washington, out in the Pac-12, maybe not the saving grace out there. Oklahoma goes to the wire with UCF. You got the win. You fought through it. You were at home. How do you ever end up in that position? Texas survives Houston on the road. And, oh, by the way, they are now without their starting quarterback for the next couple of 3 weeks. They lose Quinn Ewers in the process. If we didn't have enough questions about Texas already, we do now. I do. Oregon got a win. They're still in it as much as anybody's in it out there in the Pac-12. That's going to be a mess as those teams play each other. They might play themselves completely out of the consideration for the CFP. Alabama won. Sure, we all know about that. Tennessee face planted, gave up 27 points and a half unanswered to the Crimson Tide. But do we still know what Alabama is? I think Alabama's clearly improving. But I think I still feel kind of the same way I have felt about Alabama. I mean, remember in the preseason, I did pick them to win the division, mostly because they had LSU at home. That game's coming up in a couple weeks. So I guess we're still on that path. But I don't think I have a good answer for what Alabama is. They clearly have flaws. USC, god awful. Just awful. Their offense cannot be any better than it was last year. They're pretty good this year. But Caleb Williams, draft stock dropping. Offensive line, awful. Defense, putrid. Can we not have to listen to them about the Trojans anymore this season? Thank you. Pick up your prize on the way out. LSU had a bye. No, they didn't. Did they? I'd have to look that up. Either way, they still don't play great defense. They didn't have a bye. They played Army. Sorry, Army. Sorry. But they got the easy win. Jaden Daniels still running that offense. Offense looked good. Still don't know if they can play any defense. They're hanging around the chicken coop, if you will. 2 losses. They're still out there. Utah, yeah, they beat USC. Physically beat them. Punched them in the face for 4 quarters and beat them. Took all the grit that they could muster. And a kid that was stocking shelves at Lowe's last week, or 2 weeks prior, took him and beat the Trojans in the Coliseum. But let's be real here. Cam Rising taking a red shirt this year, a medical red shirt. He's not going to play for Utah. Utah took advantage of a down bad USC team, got that win. But Utah, not a serious contender here in the CFP for the ultimate prize. All this tells me that regardless of what you think of our Bulldogs, and by the way, I spent last week talking about this, and we didn't play, so the numbers didn't change much. But they are still in the top 10 in both offense and defense, total offense and defense, in the entire country. That's a pretty good team. I don't care who you played. You're 7 games into the season. That's a pretty good team. I'm going to check my notes here because if I can find them, I don't want to mess this up. Yeah, total offense, total defense. Here we go. Dawgs still right there in the top 10. Number 3 in total offense. Number 6 in total defense. Scoring offense, the Dawgs are in the top 10 at 7. Scoring defense, Dawgs in the top 10 at 7. Georgia, along with Michigan and a couple other schools, appear to have the kind of balance that it's going to take to be there when it's all said and done, to be there in the end. Georgia also has flaws. They are improving. At this point in the season, everyone has injuries. Georgia, fortunately, has had a lot of theirs already. So the good news is maybe we're on the other side of that. Maybe the Dogs are healing up as we finish up October and head into November. Now, you may have noticed, I posted it on social media, and I may as well bring this up here in just a second. But my big takeaway from this whole past weekend, where I actually got to watch the games, is that none of this happens in a vacuum. Georgia may not be 2021 Georgia with a dominant defense that wins the national title. Georgia may not be 2022 Georgia that averaged over 41 points a game and claimed a second consecutive national championship. But Georgia is a really good football team. And we're going to find out just how good they are over the next few weeks. But again, none of this happens in a vacuum. And when I look at this Georgia team, as we sit here today, and compare them to a Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State, Washington, Florida State, Alabama, LSU, I feel pretty good about Georgia's chances in the college football playoff once they get there. Now, as I said, there's work to do. You've got regular season games in front of you. You've got the championship game. But I think that if the Dogs navigate their way to get there, you could look at them as an odds-on favorite to win it again, just based on what we've seen from these other teams. Remember, football is a game of matchups. It's not played on paper. And when you actually get on the field with somebody, you can exploit those matchups where you have the advantage. That's how you win games. Good scheme paired with really good players. That's how you win games. Then there's the intangible. Those things that you just do every day so long you don't even think about it anymore. The standard that you hold yourself to, and we heard this week, according to at least one NFL scout, that no college football program in the country practices as hard as Georgia does every day. The competition is greater at Georgia, position by position, than it is anywhere else across the college football landscape. When that is the standard, and then you take that into a playoff scenario and you have one of the master motivators in the game on your sideline, one of the best coaching staffs in the country, if not the best, on your sideline, getting you ready for that matchup, that one-shot matchup. You get those kids ready, you turn those really good players loose, and you take your chances. I feel good about that. I think you should too. But let's not put the cart before the horse. Let's not do that. But one note on the CFP before we kind of focus in closer on the Dogs. Next Tuesday, the first CFP rankings come out. Georgia will not be ranked number one in that poll. That's how I feel about it. They might not even be ranked. Well, inside the top four. Georgia could very easily find themselves sitting at 4 or 5. And that's just going to blow some people's minds that haven't been paying attention. Doesn't mean anything really. The only poll that matters is that last one But when you watch those things unveiled in the big production that will be the TV unveiling of the college football playoffs, their first rankings here in 2023, do not be shocked if you do not see the Georgia Bulldogs pop in at number 1. That's probably, if I had to guess, that's probably going to be a Michigan team. You could see Georgia at 3, maybe 4. But again, I think you might see them at 5. Just depends on how you want to weight it, how the people in that room want to weight it. But again, it doesn't matter. I just didn't want you guys to be caught off guard. Now, if I'm wrong, then we need to reevaluate maybe how they're looking at everything, just so we fully understand it better. Maybe get Reese Davis, hit him up on Twitter, X, and say, hey, Reese, ask a real question and find out the Dogs. Why are they number 1? So no, when the Dogs pop in there at 3 or 4 or even 5, I will not be surprised. Which leads me to something I posted this week, and I want to pop it up here on the screen so you can look at it too. Now, all that talk in the offseason about Georgia's schedule, I told you the whole time it didn't matter, because just like last year and just like the year before, once we get to the midpoint of the season, once we head down to Jacksonville, things get serious for the Dogs. And in each of those past 2 seasons, just like this year, when you look up and you look beyond the St. Johns River, you see that the opponents remaining on Georgia's schedule are going to be ranked teams. We all have a better feel for who these teams are now. Tennessee's the one everybody told you about in the preseason. They're still out there, but we know something about Tennessee. And I've told you for months, can Tennessee beat Georgia? Sure. But we've seen them play now. We kind of know who they are. Still dangerous. Still expect Georgia to win. But there are a few names that maybe people didn't think about that were going to be challenging. People didn't think Florida were going to win 5 games this year. Yet, here they are on the come up a little bit, feeling good about themselves, have some confidence. Hell, Steve Spurrier, I learned this afternoon, even predicted the Gators upset this week. Steve Spurrier. If you're a Gen Xer like me, you're like, oh, ugh. The catalyst for my intense hatred of the Florida Gators. Called for the Gators to upset the Dogs this week. We'll see, Steve. If you keep looking around, Ole Miss is there. Now, I told you before the season that Ole Miss could be a dangerous game for the Dogs. It's the week before they go to Tennessee. Everybody's talking about Tennessee. I said Ole Miss is dangerous because of who and what they are and how they do what they do. That hasn't changed. I still expect Georgia to win that game, but it's dangerous. That could be a top 10 matchup in Athens. Sanford would go nuts for that. Can you imagine a top 10 bout between the hedges with everything on the line? CFP rankings flying around? Man, I'd love to see that. Missouri, before Ole Miss ever gets there, Missouri went from being a team that nobody has been talking about outside of yours truly to a team that now everybody thinks is poised to take the Dogs down. Luther Burden is unstoppable. Brady Cook is on fire. Eli Drinkwitz found his magic again. I don't mean to mock Missouri too hard. I have been a believer in Missouri this year. When nobody else thought they were going to win, I'm here telling you, look out for Missouri. That's a good team. So, yeah, they're going to challenge Georgia. Can they beat Georgia? Absolutely. They, like Georgia this week, headed into the cocktail party in Jacksonville. Missouri's on a bye. So, they're self-scouting. You know they've been looking at Georgia. here we go. Here we go. Another highly ranked matchup between the hedges. So all those season ticket holders who were all in a ruffle about how bad, the schedule was, I hear you. I hear you, and I get it. But look at what's in front of you here in November. Two back-to-back home games against ranked opponents. All eyes are going to be on the Bulldogs. And it's like Glenn Schumann and Kirby Smart said last year. It's a big game because Georgia's in it. And everybody's going to take their shot at the king. So get ready. Get your snacks, get your drinks. This is going to be a fun ride, Dog fans. And if we allow ourselves to look a little further, like I said, I expect Georgia to beat Missouri, to beat Ole Miss, to beat Florida, to beat Tennessee. I expect them to win the East. I expect them to get to Atlanta. We'll find out in a couple of weeks who's going to show up and take on the Dogs in the championship game should they get there. LSU and that high-flying offense and sus defense, or Alabama with that really good defense and that less than stellar offense. That game's at Tuscaloosa in a couple of weeks. Essentially, that's why I picked Alabama to win the game. That's why I picked Alabama to be in Atlanta. It's going to be a fun one to watch. None of this happens in a vacuum. We're not siloed off. So even as I look not only at the national picture and where Georgia stands and the opportunities that they have moving forward, when I look inside the SEC, I feel very much the same. Georgia has the team, the coaching, all of the things necessary to make it through this next stretch of games, ranked opponents, and remain undefeated. As I mentioned last week, think about what that's going to mean. No one that I've heard that has a national platform or voice in college football is stepping up and saying, I expect Georgia to remain undefeated and get back to Atlanta. No one is saying that. They're all like, no, Georgia's gettable. No, they're going to trip up here or there. I expected Georgia to win these games in the preseason. I expect Georgia to win these games now. And unlike most of those voices that are looking for a reason to question what Georgia's doing, I see it exactly the opposite. And I touched on it last week. The fact that they are now going to be without the best player in the country for the next few weeks, you can't replace him. You're obviously not going to be the same team. But this team, under these leaders and these coaches, is a team that I look at that will become galvanized, that will get better because of it. There's something in front of them to go chase. When someone, and this works, this is in all of life, every facet. When someone is really, really good at what they do, even if they're doing everything they can do to stay at that high level and stay right on the cutting edge, when there's something in front of them to chase, a little late addition to the party, if you will, it juices those performers to then turn it on up, to rise to another level, to find that extra gear. And I think that's what we're going to see from this Georgia Bulldog team. History tells me I'm not crazy for thinking that. Ultimately, it will play out on the field. We'll see. But that's how I feel about it as we walk into it. That's how I feel about it as we walk into the rest of our season. But I'll tell you something that I'm not actually walking toward right now. And that is the world's largest outdoor cocktail party in Jacksonville on the banks of the St. Johns. My Georgia Bulldogs are about to roll in, cross that bridge, and take on those hated Gators. It's no mystery. I've said it countless times. This is my game. This is the game that means more to me personally than any other game on Georgia's schedule. There are a lot of reasons for that. And I am fired up and ready to go get it done. I want to go to that game. I want to be there and soak it all in. I won't be there this year. But in every way other than my physical self, I will be wrapped up in Jacksonville. This one is a lot of fun. And that's why when you come out on the good side of it, it feels so good. And when you come out on the short end, it's hard to find a worse feeling. That's where I'm at this week. I have faith in my guys that they're going to go down there and get this done. But if we're going to look at it in kind of a break it down kind of way, I don't want to get too far into it because we could rattle through all the stats. Your eyes would glaze over. But the bottom line is this. If you're looking statistically, Georgia outclasses Florida in virtually every way. Pick a statistic, Georgia is better. A look up and down the roster tells you Georgia is better at most every position. I know that Florida is going to come into this game playing hard. The win against South Carolina did wonders for Billy Napier and that team. This game in Jacksonville is huge. It's huge for recruiting. The Gators are feeling themselves a little bit. They've got some confidence going. They are going to give Georgia everything they've got. And they're going to be playing stress-free. The reality is if they win the game, Florida's in first place in the East and controls everything. That's the reality. Good news is Georgia knows this, as if they needed anything to get them focused. They know this is not just a rollover game. And then all you have to do is put that fact in front of them. If you want to go to Atlanta, you have to beat the Gators. There's some good news this week on the injury front. I alluded to it before. It looks like Georgia's going to be getting back some studs this week, some of their starters. Who knows exactly how much they're going to play, but a healthier Georgia is a better Georgia. There's no two ways around that. I think because of the way this game is going to go, and there is one stat I want to point to, and it would be the third down numbers. Graham Mertz is good on third down. That's one of the reasons that you've heard about him so much recently. He's completing his passes on third down. His percentages are crazy, some way over 70% on third down. But their conversion rate's not great, which means he's throwing the ball short of the sticks and they're being stopped short. My Georgia Bulldogs are the very best in the country on defending third downs. So, when you look at just third down, I think that's where the game's going to be decided. Run game is always important in this matchup. But at the end of the day, getting off the field when you're supposed to is going to tell the tale here. And how do you do that? You win on first and second down. Again, pick a statistic. Georgia has the better list of numbers heading into this game. I think if Florida is going to take a shot at Georgia, they may as well do the thing. I think they're going to come out swinging. I think they're going to try to get after Carson Beck. I think they're going to take their shots on offense. I believe Georgia has answers for that. I mean, as the back-to-back and reigning national champions, you get everyone's best shot. They bring pressure. Georgia has answers. Carson Beck, in case you didn't know, is a Jacksonville kid. So this is a homecoming for him. I can see a world where Florida does their best to get after Carson Beck. They bring some heat. They try to get after him. And remember, Georgia's only allowed 6 sacks this season. So Florida knows they have to bring the heat. They come after Carson, and 15 makes them pay. Those passes that were missed earlier in the season, maybe this is the week that Carson puts it right on them. Big play after big play. You could see Georgia go big here. I don't know that I see this as an intermediate kind of final score. Like I said, I think Florida's going to play hard. If they land a few punches, I could absolutely see this thing being a 7-10 point game. I still have faith in the Dogs, but I could see it underneath the spread as we head into the weekend. But I can also see this as a 3-4 touchdown Georgia win. Because if you come, you better get home, right? You don't miss the bear. So if they miss, then hopefully Carson Beck and those wide receivers, pass catchers, playmakers will make them pay on Saturday in Jacksonville. I mean, at the end of the day, this game for me is just about who's more physical, who is going to execute, as every football game is. But then it's those intangibles. And I think Georgia has those in place, along with the playmakers and the coaches, to get this victory over the Gators. I think this could be a turning point in Florida's season. They could find themselves on the slides on the back end of their schedule this year. So I'm on the Dogs to get the win in Jacksonville. Go Dogs. They cannot beat Florida badly enough to satisfy me and make me happy. I will enjoy it regardless. 1 point win, I'm going to love it. But man, if they put 50 on them, that makes me feel feisty. So before we get completely beyond it, the national story that's out there this week, Michigan is apparently a bunch of cheating, liar, cheaters. I heard the statistic earlier. I apologize, I didn't write it down. But Harbaugh's first 3 years at Michigan, his record was something like, 30-15 or something like that. And that's who Michigan was. And then over the last 2 or 3 years, after the assistant coach or graduate assistant or whatever he is, the in question, after he was brought on board, Michigan has now gone 30-3 or something insane like that. Nothing to see here. We've all seen the videos on Twitter bouncing around about people. You see all the heads turn in unison. Everyone looks this way. Oh, they're checking. Everyone looks this way. Oh, they made their check. And now the Michigan sideline erupts, signaling the plays. Hell, as I was just about to get on here tonight, according to reporting from Mark Weiser of the Athens Banner Herald, Michigan planned as many as 5 Georgia football games for in-person scouting. So yeah, this touches Georgia. And they still got the maize and blue beat out of them in Miami. So what do I think should happen? Listen, you sign up to play the game. There are rules. You break the rules, own up to it. You're busted. Pay the price. If the NCAA handles it, we know this isn't going to, nothing's going to happen for a while. I've heard some other people talking about how the Big Ten could get involved. I think I heard Coach Donnan say some things about that today, about how they have the ability to get involved. And if you're in the Big Ten and you think something like this is happening and everything is pointing to the fact that Michigan's guilty, how can you let the season go on, right? How can you let Michigan succeed if you know they're dirty? I know that those teams would be upset. I know I would be. I mean, that'd be like Sankey looking at Ole Miss and saying, yeah, you bought all those players above and beyond NIL, but whatever. You're our best shot to make the playoffs, so we're just not going to do it. Just don't do it again. I don't think the people in Athens or Tuscaloosa are going to be very happy about that. So I think and I said as much this week on social, if it can be proven, these are the kind of things that demand immediate firings and or resignations of not only the people directly involved, but of Jim Harbaugh. Michigan should not play in the Big Ten championship game this year. And then when the NCAA comes around eventually to doing whatever they're going to do, Michigan should be stripped of all those victories that they've had. That's what I think. I mean, that's how it is to me. This is a competition issue. That's why this rule is in place. Some schools can afford to go do this. And by the way, this dude, Stallion, the assistant who apparently was making all this happen, listen, he and I probably make about the same amount of money every year. Who's buying these tickets? It's not him. Where's that money coming from? Follow the money. If there's something there, track it down. So, as far as the college football playoff is concerned, it's within their power. They can make up the rules as they want to punish Michigan. I can't see them doing anything unless someone else does something first. So once again, you have to turn your eyes back to the Big Ten. And do you have, I don't know, what's the right word here? Do you have the backbone to take down your conference banner carrier at the moment? What's more important? Winning football games, making the college football playoff, or the integrity of your conference? That's the question, Big Ten. We all are waiting to see what your answer is. The world of college football. Never boring. Never boring. So with that, friends, I want to say thank you for joining me for another edition of How About That, the Dawgs Cast. And as Kirby always says,
Told him, how about them fucking dogs? That's what I told him.
it's time to go beat those Gators. Enjoy the games this week. Enjoy your families. Everyone stay safe out there. And I'll see you after another wonderful college football weekend. Go Dogs.
Told him, how about them fucking dogs? That's what I told him.